all the arguments that both of us would take part in.
A question for Dr. Craig.
Your definition of begins to exist, quote unquote, namely that X begins to exist when, quote, X exists at T. There is no time immediately prior to T at which X exists, and the actual world contains no state of affairs involving X's timeless existence, close quote, contains one clause that is not known a priori by any means and one that seems decidedly ad hoc. How do you answer those that claim that your use of this definition is unjustified and disingenuous?
Boy, Donald, why did you pick that one off all those from the internet? This concerns a philosophical definition of what it means to begin to exist. And the author, or the reader has obviously read something of what I've written on that concept. The reason I would try to justify it is this, is you want to get an intuitive concept of what it means for something to come into existence at some point, but that wouldn't rule out a priori things like time itself having a beginning. So, for example, you couldn't say to begin to exist means to exist at a time t, and that there is a time before t at which this thing doesn't exist, because then time itself couldn't have a beginning because there could never be a time before time. So my attempt was to craft a definition which would capture our intuitive idea of something beginning to exist, but wouldn't rule out a priori things like the existence of a timeless being or the existence of a beginning to time itself.
But you see, a timeless being is just gobbledygook. It doesn't mean anything at all.
Oh, not at all. I don't see any reason to think that this is incoherent. You have to give an argument for that.
A question for Dr.
You have
Atkins.
to give the argument for the existence of a timeless being.
If you claim that, I gave an argument for the existence.
You are claiming that there is a timeless being. That is a totally meaningless remark. But it either has to be explained or withdrawn.
A question for Dr. Atkins.
Yes, Dr. Atkins, it would seem to me in an atheistic universe that if we took a hypothetical example of Adolf Hitler, that's obviously not hypothetical, but if we carry it to the extent that, let's suppose that society decided for whatever reasons that they wouldn't have punitive damages against someone like Hitler, because there is no such thing as right and wrong, as far as I'm understanding what you're saying about the universe.
No. They're saying there is right and wrong. They're not objective.
Well, the question is, what is the basis for it? Because, in other words, if Hitler lives his life and he's not punished and he's not overthrown, let me finish the question. If Hitler lives his life and he's not punished and he's not overthrown, and Mother Teresa lives her life and she goes through and they both die, in your universe, as I'm understanding it, there's no difference between the two of them when they die. There's no such thing as real justice in the universe because, in your scenario,
well, there isn't justice in the universe, really. I mean, it's a justice-free world. But no, I'm not. I think that I, speaking as an atheist, can identify what is probably the springs of my own morality, which is not to intrude upon the aspirations of other people. Now, it seems to me that Hitler did intrude pretty heavily on the aspirations of an awful lot of people. And I also think that Sister Teresa also intruded, not so damagingly, but she's got a lot to answer for, too.
Is it objectively morally wrong to kill Jews? Is it objectively morally wrong to kill Jews because they are Semitic?
It is wrong because it intrudes on other people's aspirations. And I don't know what the word objective means, because you're trying to trap me.
Independently of whether anybody believes in these values or not. That's what I mean by objective. It seems to me, on your view, you simply have to say this is a way that the evolutionary genome of the Homo sapiens species propagates itself, but there's nothing really wrong with killing Jews.
Well, I think if you were to turn that into caterpillars and wasps, then they kill each other, and they don't have qualms about it.
Right.
It's just because we have an intellect that can analyze what is really involved in killing the Jews, and we find it repugnant because it's an intrusion into their liberties, thwarting of their aspirations. It's doing something that we wouldn't want to be done to ourselves. It's all those things. Good and evil is a whole complex of responses and behaviors, which we, being conscious beings, can judge the consequences of.
Dr. Atkins, Dr. Craig, ladies and gentlemen, excuse me, I've been told to make a few closing remarks because we have to cut out exactly at 3 minutes and 35 seconds. I want to thank the principals very much for their enlightening and impassioned contributions, and to thank you all, and especially you over there who are so annoyed by my partisanship. My role is a little bit difficult here. So what can I say that is consistent with the role of the moderator? Well, I do remember that Mencken was once asked, what if, after he died, he all of a sudden found himself in the company of angels? Well, he said, I guess I would say, I was mistaken. Now, I don't know whether it is a part of the faith of atheism to acknowledge the possibility of being mistaken. But I do think that the arguments tonight do strengthen the relative moderation of one position over against another. I think I heard Dr. Atkins say that a belief could not be defended if in fact it failed to prove everything and to make everything understandable. That has not been my understanding of it. In my book, I quote the theologian, the bishop actually, Butler. He was cited once by somebody who said, well, you know, Butler had the only answer you can give in a situation like that, which is that if he had made the universe, things would have been a little bit different. Butler's escape, I find extremely useful, i.e., there is a lot about understanding and about these quarrels, which would be more transparent if God, if you had created the universe and faced up to all these quantities. But I do think that I can't go to sleep tonight without giving some vague communication of my own sentiments in the matter. And they are, it seems to me that there is a poetry in the one position that does not require satisfactory answers to all questions. Still, to the extent that we are concerned with the empirical argument, I was much boosted when I read at age 17 the comment 100 years ago by somebody who turned to the young scholar and said, I would rather believe in God than believe that you can deduce Hamlet from the molecular structure of a mutton chop. I find that still a persuasive argument, and I incline towards it. If one wants to say, how possibly can you account for the existence of man in a world created by God, I think of Professor G.D.H. Cole. He missed the train from Oxford to London one day and sat down rather grumpily to wait for the local train because the express train didn't stop in Oxford. A few minutes later, the express train unaccountably did, so he simply opened the door and sat down, and the train took off. And the conductor approached him and said, sir, the train doesn't stop here. He said, I know, and I'm not in it. Thank you, and best of luck to both of you.